Hey everybody, it's Miranda here from the Swirly Do's Education Design Team, and I'm going to be working on the cover of the planner that you get in the Technique Kit this month. So, the first thing I'm doing, and I've already done a little bit of it, this already looks very vintage as you can see, but what I've done is I'm going in with some tea bags, and I literally just brewed this tea for my boyfriend, so now I'm just kind of squeezing some of it on here in different areas, and I did it to the back already, and it's not a very dark, a dark difference. It's just pretty subtle on this brown, but if you do this on white paper and stuff, it's obviously going to be a lot darker. So I'm just going to kind of move this around and let it sit on here a little bit, and then as soon as that's done, I'm going to come back and do the next step. Okay, I've done a couple of layers of that. Like I said, it's very subtle, but you can definitely see it on there. A lot of this will get covered. I'm going to do tons of layering of papers on here, but whenever this pops through, I definitely want that to show. I'm going to do something different to the binding, so all of my elements and everything I do, I'm going to kind of cut off right here because I'm going to cover that up on the binding. Now I'm going to take out the mask, the Yummy Yummy mask. This one is amazing. I've been eyeing this one, and then as soon as I found out it was coming in our kit, I was like rejoicing because it's just amazing. It's the new Prima one. I think it's from the Lifetime collection. I'm not quite sure, but beautiful. So I'm just going to use some. I get asked a lot what I use on for my masks, and I use this stuff right here. You get it at Home Depot. It's a very gritty texture. It's not smooth like modeling paste. I prefer that. So I'm just going to go ahead and use a palette knife to kind of get this on here. And then just randomly, actually I'm going to kind of cover the whole thing because I don't know where my papers will end up showing through. I'm going to do a lot of layering, so I think it's just best if I pretty much cover the whole front of this with the mask. That way I don't have to worry about any blank spots. I'm just spreading that across. And as you can see, this stuff is super thick and really gritty. And then also in the Technique Kit is the Silks Acrylic Glaze, which I'm definitely going to be using. That stuff is just yummy. It would look great like with a sponge dabbed onto here as well. But I'm going for a more subtle look on this one. Okay, so I want to do a lot of paper layering, and I'm going to be using most of the papers from the main kit this month, and it's the Engraver paper. It's amazing. So I'm just going to pick a couple of sheets out. I really like this one because all of this already looks really vintage, really worn. And I'm definitely going to use the math. I'm obsessed with this little math right here. So I'm going to fussy cut that out and use it on here. But right now I'm just going to kind of play around and tear pieces of this out to kind of fit on here. This is still wet, so I'm just going to do this while it is drying. And then I'm also going to take some of the metal foil tape that you get. Love using this stuff so much. I'm going to cut little pieces about 6 inches long so they will fit in my embossing folder. This is just a Tim Holtz one. It's kind of like a ledger one from my stash. Let me grab my scissors really quickly, y'all. They are eluding me in my massive mess over here. So I'm just going to cut a strip of it, and I'm going to emboss it. And then I'm going to randomly tear it and adhere it on here as well. Okay, so I've got some pieces picked out that I'm going to use to layer on here. I may pull more out, but for now this is kind of what I've picked out. And all the white ones I decided to emboss. And I'm not going to ink it or anything, but I'm just going to leave it embossed, so it'll be a very subtle, you know, detail on there. So I'm taking a little strip of some black and just going to start randomly tearing these into strips so I can start layering them, some of them bigger than others. So I'm going to go ahead and just start tearing these all up, and then I'll come back and place them down. Okay, so I've played around with tearing up the papers and kind of figure out where I want to place them. So I'm going to take a picture really quick on my iPad so I remember my placement, and I'm going to start distressing all of these, and then also I wanted to use this foil tape in here. So I've already embossed it, and I'm just going to start tearing it into random little pieces just like the paper. Just keep tearing it into pieces. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to whitewash this a little bit. I'm going to use some gesso from last month's Technique kit. And let me grab a paintbrush really quickly to just kind of tone this down and not make the metal so shiny on there. Just going to put the paint on each piece. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see better. And then I'm going to kind of just blot it off so you can see what that piece looks like versus that one. So it still looks, hopefully my camera will zoom, still looks really metallic but just not so clean. So I'm going to do this to all the pieces really quickly. Okay, I've got all of those whitewashed, and now I'm going to start distressing the edges of my paper here. And I'm using frayed burlap distress ink. I'm just going to go in all over all of these pieces and distress. And you can see I tore in there too, little details that will show once you hit them with ink that you couldn't really see before. And you can even hit some of those embossed areas and it'll create really pretty texture. Okay, I've got all my pieces distressed up and ready to start adhering. So what I've done is I've taken my water bottle here and just poured some of the water out, and I'm going to add some gesso in there. Because I want to spray this down my cover and let it kind of whitewash the front part. So any parts that are showing through where that mask is, it's just nice and pretty and distressed, and it's got some different contrasting colors. I'm just putting a little bit down in there. Okay, so I'm just going to start spraying my cover, and I want it to run down like that. Okay, and I'm going to stop it right there because I like the way those strips look. So I'm going to let that dry completely. Okay. So the gesso is completely dried, and you can see just how pretty that looks and just really distressed and aged. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the tea bags. Although they're not that dark, they will hit some of the masked part, and I think it'll create a really cool look. So I'm just squeezing these towards the top here and letting it run down. Just want lots of different colors and distressing in the background. Okay, so that's what it looks like for now. Okay, so we are pretty much ready to adhere our strips down. One last thing, I'm just going to distress the edges with some frayed burlap. And I've pulled some of the ribbon from the main kit, this one right here, and I cut it in half and then cut it in half again. So I'm going to use that to tie, although I don't think I'll really need to keep this tied. It's not going to be that full like a mini album, but I like the look of it. So I'm going to adhere that down here too, so I can use that as the closure for this. Frayed burlap distress ink is my favorite. It's very vintage looking without being too overbearing. Okay, so you can see what our background looks like so far. The tea and the gesso and the masking, it's a really pretty aged effect. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be using 3-in-1, or not 3-in-1, Fabri-Tac glue. It's my new favorite glue. And I've got a leak here for some reason. Let me get this cleaned off real quick. I love this glue. I think it's very, very strong. It doesn't take as long to dry as like the E6000 and stuff, and it's just much stronger than hot glue. So I'm going to adhere this down first before I start doing my papers, and I'm going to put it about right there. Okay, let's see if this end's a little more closed. Okay, just kind of push it down good because I don't want it to show a big bump on top of the paper. Okay, before I start adhering my embellishments down, I've pulled them all out that I'm going to use. I want to do something different to the binding. So I pulled out a piece of the engraver paper from the main kit, and I want to use this instead of this darker one on my binding. And then I'm going to lace it up with some darker ribbon, so it'll still, you know, blend in very well. So I'm going to measure this really quickly. 9 inches. Okay, so I'm going to trim this down to 9. Okay, and then figure out about how much I need. Let's see. I really want the map to show, so I'm going to cut this little piece off right here. And then I'm just going to trim it to about right there. Okay, and that should be perfect. Okay, and I want to emboss this too, but it's a little bit too big, so it's going to be a little tricky to try to emboss. And then after I emboss it, I'm going to line another paper underneath it, because when you emboss this paper, any paper, it gets kind of flimsy and it's not going to be very strong and hold up on there. So I'm going to go ahead and emboss this, and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've got this completely embossed, and I couldn't get all of it, you know, because the paper's too wide to fit in there. I tried to do some tricks to get it, but a couple places got blank, so I'm actually going to flip this. It's going to be upside down, but, you know, you're not going to notice, and put that on the other side. But I embossed it, and then I lined it with another sheet of the paper from the main kit. It's the Authentic Peaceful Collection, because I want it to be really sturdy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lace it up. So I've already scored it to fit on my spine here, and I'm going to use some laces right here. But I want to punch my holes because I want to do some corset lacing here on the edge of it. So what I do when I do that is I just make sure it's completely lined up first, and then I just eyeball it. I take a pencil or a pen, whatever you want to use, in this case a Sharpie, so neither of those, and I just start kind of going with my ruler, because I want them to be at least straight across from each other, and creating little dots. Okay, and I'm just going to go all the way up the spine doing this. So I never completely measure it. I totally just eyeball it and try to keep it as even as possible. I'm just not a measurer, and I'm not that big of a perfectionist, so. Okay, so I've got my pieces cross-stitched, but I'm not going to tie my bow yet until I get it on there. I think I'm going to do my bow at the top of this one too and just hang some charms from it. So I'm going to use the Fabri-Tac glue to adhere this, but I'm also going to use a little bit of hot glue as well. So so it'll set faster. So I'm just going to go along the edge here. And then on this part as well. Okay, and then I'm going to use hot glue to make it set immediately. Okay, and then quickly put this piece on there. That way while the Fabri-Tac is drying, the hot glue is still holding it in place. Okay. Okay, y'all, so this is pretty much it for my book. I'm going to go ahead and add my embellishments, but I'm going to do that in a fast play. I just tied a double bow here, and I used a different color seam binding, really vintage looking one, on there, and just did a double bow. So this is it, but you can see all the texture. It's just fun to play with layering papers, embossing. I think embossing is like a technique that I forget to use a lot of times, but it's really, really stunning. So of course you'll see these shots at the beginning of the video showing the detail. But I'm just going to go into a speed up now of me adding the last embellishments on here, and I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, just let me know.